All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm excited to host our speakers today. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction on their background, and then we'll hear a little bit more about their topic. So Tony Contento is a program manager for general education, mathematics, sciences, and interdisciplinary professional studies at Colorado State University Global, and he is also a part-time faculty member at SUNY Oswego in the Department of Biological Sciences. Tony also serves as the Director of Research for the American Leadership and Policy Foundation, which is a nonpartisan think tank focused on educating and informing citizens and leaders of our nation's most significant public policy issues. Dr. Contento has been involved in online education since 2004 and has focused his research efforts on the delivery of online STEM materials and improving student engagement through the novel presentation of relevant soft skills in the classroom. And we're also joined by Jennifer Naimark. Jennifer is an adjunct instructor at CSU Global. She has 10 years of higher education teaching experience, and she has authored and edited numerous works on teaching and learning, and is dedicated to improving adult learning through relevancy and transformation. So thank you both for being here.
Our pleasure.
Thank you, Erin. Okay.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. Either live or recorded. So Jennifer and I want to talk to you today about a project that we worked on at CSU Global, integrating human intelligence skills into our general education courses. So these courses, as I'm sure many of you know, are not always enjoyed by students. Students who really want to work on their core curriculum don't see the benefit of a well-rounded general education program as part of their program of study. So our main goal for this was to let students know, go ahead, Jeff, that's fine. To let students know why they were taking these courses, why take history, why take art. And the reason, honestly, is these soft skills, these human intelligence skills. We wanted the students to understand what they were carrying away from this, not just a background knowledge of some of the theoretical information from these disciplines, but we also wanted to show them that these courses not only teach them how to learn, but grant them relevant skills that can be used in industry, and in all honesty, that show the importance of these courses again to policymakers. We wanted to make sure that everybody who was involved knew that these courses had value, more than just sharing the discipline-specific information. So what we did is we worked both with our faculty, we worked with our industry partners, and we worked with our partners in the State Department of Higher Ed. And we determined what skills were going to be important in industry and what skills were important to our friends in the Capitol. And we highlighted those skills across all of our general education courses. Next slide, Jennifer. Jen, do you want to do this one?
Sure. So I have a big love of teaching English and working with students with the cognitive content, the content that the states and the legislatures and HLC say that we need to teach. But what I've noticed in my years of teaching is we don't really teach students how to engage with the content, and we don't give them the behavioral skills. We don't give them the behavioral activities to engage with the content. So the general education core at any institution across the U.S. is 30 credits as dictated by the HLC, and that's 25% of the degree program. And as Tony mentioned, there are policymakers and there are students questioning why students have to take general education courses. And we typically teach students only on the cognitive domain, as I mentioned, and that's a Bloom's cognitive domain. And what we don't teach are the affective skills, these soft skills that students need to understand in order to be able to engage with that cognitive content. So we're going to highlight one of the courses that we embedded the soft skills, the human intelligence skills, in during this presentation. And what we really wanted to look at was a general education literature course. That's one of the prime targets of students and of legislators, because it's not STEM. But so we looked at, how to analyze a student's ability to read and write about literature on the cognitive domain. And on the affective domain, we brought it down to looking at how students engage in teamwork. And these are, the soft skills related to feelings and emotions and their attitudes about a subject matter. And we divided it up. And so I want to talk a little bit about what affective skills are. Affective skills are related to a learner's interests, attitudes, and motivations. And as we looked at CSU Global, we wanted to measure students' ability to engage in teamwork while in a literature course. And really what this is doing, it's helping students to respond to what they find and value in the content. And the cognitive skills, as I mentioned, are typically assessed, and it's analysis, it's seeing if they understand the material, and those are things we always measure. So what I want to do is give you guys an analogy as to why human intelligence skills are important. And Tony did a great job of explaining, what policymakers think about general education, what students think about general education, but I want to talk about why human intelligence skills. And a great analogy I saw explained for me was the analogy of a dollar bill, and that's a human intelligence skill or a soft skill, and $100 bill, and that's the degree. That's a degree that we give in higher education. And sometimes there are points in time where the dollar bill or the soft skill is going to be of greater value to a student than the $100 bill or the degree. So just like with a vending machine, a dollar bill is going to get you something out of the machine at that very just-in-time moment that with an employer that the student might need. But the $100 bill is just not going to work. One, the student may not have the degree with this analogy, and the employer may be looking for a particular skill. In this case, we were looking at teamwork in the general education curriculum. So I want to talk a little bit about how and why we would blend the cognitive and affective domain. And we base this on the theory of confluent learning. And the definition of confluent learning is a learning approach that works to stimulate the affective states and increase student interest and relevancy to reinforce the cognitive knowledge. It's sort of like priming the pump. Many of my writing students enter the writing classroom really truly believing they can't write. So giving them opportunities to engage with the content where they find relevancy is really key, and this is super important for adult learners. So the practical implications of, thinking about confluent learning in tandem with human intelligence skills or soft skills is to really, create some greater relevancy for general education courses and, future practices for why we're doing all this. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. And Tony, this is, Tony, if you could talk about this, please.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So in order to get this process going, we definitely needed buy-in. Now, gathering together all of the information in the requests that we had from our industry partners and from our partners in higher ed, Department of Higher Ed, we had a lot of testimonials. We had a lot of information. We brought that forward to our administration, but this was a full, complete transformation of our general education coursework, so we couldn't do this piecemeal. We did pilot, obviously, But once we got the green light and saw that it was effective, we moved it through the entire general education curriculum. So every general education course has this transformation. What we wanted to do was inform the students, which soft skills were paired with which content. Now, we specifically looked at assessments. All right, so when we do the badging with assessments because we want this to be an active process. It's more than just absorbing the information. Even if they get an understanding of the theory behind these human intelligence skills, we want to make sure that they're practicing them when we actually do a badging moment. But what we had to do is, basically create a mock-up, show it to administration. We ran the pilot for 2 terms, which for us is equivalent to about 16 weeks for 2 terms. And then we pushed out, and we pushed it into everything. Next slide, Jennifer.
Okay, so when we pushed this out and we were thinking about what soft skills would be into a class, we wanted to look at student knowledge, what they had to know, their skills and abilities, what soft skills did I want the students to exhibit in the course, and we had a matrix of skills that we could identify, and these include a lot of foundational skills that were tied to information literacy, teamwork, the ability to work well with others, and we also looked at intellectual behaviors. What effective soft skills do students need to use in the course to better access content, and we wanted to find out what activities can lead to this transfer, and we'll get into a little bit more about that later, about how we actually lined up soft skills activities to lead to transfer. And so what happened next was in English, for instance, and we'll drill down to English because I'm the English gal, but we wanted students to understand the knowledge they had to know. We answered the question was students need to know how to effectively read and write about literature. And the cognitive skills would be the close analysis and critical questioning. The beauty, and this is where this really fits in nicely with online education, is we decided to have these skills highlighted throughout their essays and other parts of the course, but the discussion board presents a unique place for students to engage in teamwork activities. And for an English course, critical questioning was absolutely key. And we asked students to work in teams and develop, first by themselves, individual critical questions to the content, and they were based on themes. And then we asked those students to then work in teams to develop online discussion questions that would be presented to the whole group to work together. And the students would be evaluated using a valid and effective rubric, and we chose AACU's value rubric. And so, Tony, why don't you talk a little bit about the student view of soft skills in the class?
So we wanted this to be, this badging to be dynamic, but at the same time, we also wanted to if necessary, be able to sit in the background. So what we did is we chose color coding. We also chose specific icons that would easily relay. So, I mean, we've got critical thinking right here. We've got teamwork. We've got presentation skills, digital skills. So when the students see these different icons over a specific assessment, what they can do is that they'll touch or hover over the icon, and it'll lead to a title. And they can click on this and it'll take them to a larger website that'll explain what each of these human intelligence skills represents to them and potentially to their success in the workplace. Next slide, Jennifer.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, when we talk about critical thinking, we wanted students to really think about the critical questions they were developing. And leadership was developed in these students because each student would take on a particular role in the group discussion board. We would have the group leader, we would have fact checkers, we would have cheerleaders, and we would have editors. And each person had a job to take part in. And this was done 5 times throughout the term. So students would get a chance to do every single job, and they had an ability to even reflect on what these jobs meant for them. And qualitatively, our students said that they didn't love being asked to take on these roles at first, but then saw the value and also saw the particular value to how this would affect future job applications and places they could talk about what this badge meant to them. So effectively, we wanted students to build effective relationships, and they were required, and they had to work on questioning one another while they made a case on a cognitive basis for why their question might have been better than another student's question. And it may seem a little combative at first to ask students to do this sort of thing, but it really made them very aware of what they had to learn in the content, and then how they would convey what their critical question meant and why it would be important for other students to answer that critical question in the next discussion. So they knew there was a lot at stake, and students were in a team situation. The value rubric that we used was very helpful because it allowed students to reflect on what they did in that team environment, and the instructor could assess. And we showed growth for students in this situation, and the team was required to come to consensus. So it was a good situation, and the students reported that they felt comparable. Now, we did have guiding questions for this endeavor, and particularly for English. And we wanted to know, is there a statistically significant difference in student ability to read and write about literature for students enrolled in a general education course embedding soft skills badging in comparison to a course that did not embed soft skills badging? And even though I'm an English person, I'm also a very data-driven person. I love numbers. Maybe I'm making up for something, but I really enjoy numbers and working with numbers. And so we had a good population of students. We were able to pull a significant number of students from one term to the next, and we absolutely found that there was a moderately statistically significant difference in student ability to read and write about literature based on the final essays between the classes that embedded soft skills and the classes that did not embed soft skills. And this was really promising. And so we did a standard t-test on this one. We're very, very happy with the results. Now, the second question, if there was a difference, was if there are differences in student ability to read and write about literature for students taking a general education course that embeds soft skills, is there a correlation between teamwork and student ability to read and write about literature? Now, this was the kicker, and this was why Confluent Learning was an important theory for us to look at. And there again, the students who did well on teamwork abilities, using that AACCU value rubric that we talked about, showed better performance than the students who did not do well. So we do see a pretty decent correlation. And we're not saying that one factor absolutely showed causation, but we're saying that there is correlation. And we did only look at one variable here to measure, even though we did map to various soft skills. And this was to help us, get an eyeball on what was possible. And trying to assess on over various variables would be a very daunting process. So we chose one. And I'm going to pass on to the next slide. And Tony will talk about what makes for quality soft skills incorporation.
So if you're planning on doing this at your institution, whether it's in an individual course or even across a program, the thing that made it possible for us was getting the institutional buy-in. We had to convince our administrators that this change was necessary and that it was necessary on a wide scale. When we did our integration, we moved ahead using the idea that these soft skills were going to become part of the outcomes. So that not only were they going to be integrated into the course in materials, but they were also going to be an accessible outcome that we could measure down the road. We used the same design across the entire curriculum so that all courses looked the same, so that students taking general education courses knew what they were looking at and became familiar with the badging across all courses. And then we had a good, strong assessment strategy. The outcomes for the soft skills are assessed semi-annually, so twice a year. Yes, I didn't really say that. And we also used a survey instrument to gauge student-specific engagement, understanding, and sort of their acceptance of the presence of these soft skills badges in each course. Jennifer?
Okay. So, to drill down to English, because I'm the English person, we really intentionally designed and engaged learning experiences. And that was what I didn't discuss here. Was we really developed a lot of tools, and this is really important online, to spell out exactly what students are going to do. So for instance, with the students developing their questions in the discussion board, we gave them a lot of materials that they had to work with by themselves before they ever got to the team. We wanted them to have a solid basis to working with their team. And the ticket to working with the team was working on the individual question development form. And then we had forms for working with their team. And then when they actually wrote their final essays and they had to write about their teamwork experiences, there were prompts there too. So everything was spelled out for the students, so that they weren't left floundering and trying to understand, well, what does, effective learning mean to me? That didn't have to happen. We loaded it up for them, and they were able to basically follow through with what was expected. We tried to create an environment that helped students to collaborate. And the collaborative part of this was so important. Even with working with other general education faculty, we all worked together to develop what soft skills were going to be implemented into each class, and talked together and looked at each other's mapping. And moving forward, there could be possibilities to maybe drill down, so that maybe science was looking at aspects of STEM type soft skills, and English was looking at aspects of things that we discussed previously. But what we really wanted to do was make it very clear what students were expected to do and what faculty were expected to assess on. And hopefully what we get out of this is some information that helps students to understand why general education is indeed important, and why they're spending 25% of their degree program in these courses. So the proof is in the pudding. We have very good quantitative data that shows that soft skills work, and we do have evidence from our students who tell us that they enjoyed the process, and that they were a course that they were not happy to take at the start of the term, they were now, that when the end of the term, they were happy they took it and they understood when they were taking it, where they took it. So that is pretty much the end of our presentation. And thank everybody for coming, and it's always wonderful to talk with Tony too.
So Julie Sullivan did have a question. Did you just modify existing active learning strategies in the class to incorporate the soft skills, i.e. The pretty much you had them just not labeled, or you found you had to specifically design new activities to incorporate skills? So Julie, this is actually a multi-phase process. So for phase one, we did just that. We mapped out the soft skills that were already in the course. We didn't necessarily add assessments in phase one. In phase two, we did add things to make sure that we're filling gaps. So the group work that Jennifer was describing, that was added to the courses to fill a gap that we saw across general education curriculum, where we weren't having these more collaborative human intelligence skills as part of the course. So initially, we surveyed our surroundings. We saw the wonderful things that we had already. But when we looked at the map, and we again looked at both what industry and what state ed was looking for, we realized that we did have to sort of push our curriculum design to fill some of those gaps. Now, the thing to remember too, at CSU Global, where this was conducted, we have an 18-month curriculum revision cycle and a centralized curriculum. So this particular process was going to be much easier than you would at a more traditional school where the curriculum is not necessarily centralized, between departments, for a general education program. You might get buy-in again from the English department, whereas you might not get buy-in from the chemistry department, not to pick.
Julie has another question about your badging platform. What platform do you use, and are the badges portable with students after the course?
Right now, it's all in-house, Julie. So the students, there is a way for the students to basically say, these are the courses that I took, and these are the soft skills that are represented in each course. We were looking at some of the more portable badge delivery tools. We haven't implemented those yet. But again, there are tools. I think Badgerly is the one we were looking at where it could actually be integrated in their LinkedIn profile. We thought that was very nice. The problem is we really couldn't find someone that would partner well with us yet. So we're, again, that's still more of a phase 2 issue where we're trying to get this so the students have it more portable. As it stands right now, they can take their list of courses. They can say, I've taken these general education courses, and here's the skills that were highlighted. What we want, honestly, eventually, so this is more of a phase 3 idea, is building on those soft skills so that when they take each subsequent experience, even if it's in another discipline, that if they take 2 courses that all have the same soft skills, same human intelligence skill built into them, that they get a complementary and an expansive experience, so that they're building on that. And what that'll take is for us to basically have more definition of these roles. So if a student was a cheerleader before, now they have to move into more of a leadership role in their second course experience. But we're getting there.
Lots of buy-in.
Julie also wants to know if the soft skills work is mandatory. It is mandatory. So it's built. So we have 2 assignment options for each major assessment, depending on the student's skill set. So a good example of that would be, a paper versus a presentation. The student can choose, to either highlight their writing skills highlight their presentation skills, depending on what we're talking about. That's just one example. Both of those assessments would still have the human intelligence component baked in.
So expanding on that example, Tony, are there courses where, let's say, a student seems to, consistently choose the paper option, right?
Sure.
Are there opportunities or are they encouraged in other areas to do the presentation so that they kind of get, more of the skill sets and they're not always defaulting to their comfort?
It's true, but there are some courses where the communications aspect is going to be more prevalent than others. But you're right. Eventually, they'll get bottlenecked into a point where they have to do a presentation if they haven't done one already. So we usually use sort of a comprehensive terminal assessment that we call a portfolio project. In most cases, there's a presentation component in those regardless of the discipline. It might not be big, short 2-minute, 5-minute presentation, but they are there. And the reason is, especially with the sciences. So my background is science. I want students to leave these classes because, again, with general education courses, this is probably one of 2 science classes they're going to take in their lives if they're not a STEM teacher, right? I want them to leave both with the ability to communicate science and be advocates for science. All right. If they're walking away with those 2 things, I'm not really too concerned with how much physics knowledge they take away from introduction to physics. But if they can talk science and they can understand science, if they can read an article and know if what they're reading is legitimate or not, and then communicate that to their family and peers, that's what I want them to walk away with from a STEM gen ed course.
Yeah, especially, right, in the gen ed course.
Yeah. The soft skills were specified in the rubric. We pulled, sort of had like a Frankenstein rubric where the typical things that we assess on for the cognitive were there, and we pulled in the soft skills using an AACCU value rubric for teamwork. And those can be found online. They're free, accessible from AACU. We didn't want to make anything up when it came to the soft skills.
Again, a lot of this was cobbled together. So what we wanted to do is make sure that we were providing a universal experience for the students that would be accepted by our partners in industry and by state. So there was some compromise there, but I think honestly it was more of a blending than a compromise. They all wanted the same things. They just didn't know necessarily how to present it in the same way. That's kind of what we did. By creating things the way we created them, we created a package that they could take away with that everybody would accept, whether it was a grad program or their first job, or whether it was somebody at state ed trying to show what we were doing.
And I like that alignment too with industry, because for the students eventually going out to look for maybe internships and things like that, they can say, these are some of the skills that were, that the advisory board or whatever, however you do that, is looking for, and I've attained these through this program. So, question about the students themselves, just any feedback that you may have from students in these courses on the soft skills. It's not always, I'll say it this way, sometimes courses may have this built in, but it's not always explicit, right? That this is what we're doing and this is what we're teaching. It's usually focused on the content. I'm just wondering if the students maybe had an opportunity to reflect on or identify the skills themselves, and how they can, that transfer of knowledge, how what they experienced can be used beyond their coursework.
So every course has sort of an overview of this whole human intelligence badging built in. Whether or not they read it, I guess that's up to them. But it is prevalent. So I mean, when they go to the assessment page, it's there. It's obvious for them to see it. So they know what's going on. We also work with our faculty to really kind of push this element of the course during the first week or two, just so that students know what they're getting into. The thing too with a general education curriculum is you never know if this is the student's first gen ed course. You don't know if it's the student's first course. So, you know, it's, you know, we need to make sure that they understand what's going on. Jen, did you want to add anything about the data, especially the survey data?
I touched upon that in the presentation,
Yeah.
and without giving away too much about what students said, but they were particularly, you know how vocal people are. The vocal students voiced how they were not happy with being asked to be a leader or to work with others. Some of our online students want to just basically be completely asynchronous, and the activities were designed to be asynchronous. In their essays, we specifically asked them, you know, what aspects of this did you enjoy? And eventually those same students, and we could see it through a spreadsheet that we put together, those same students eventually said, I enjoyed being able to work with my peers and being able to understand how the teamwork elements worked out. Now, you know, what was particularly telling was one student said, I wasn't happy about working in a team, but what happens when I go to work? I work in a team. And so the light bulb went off for them in that particular place. And there were a number of stories that were similar to that. And I think what's happening, and we're learning this too in COVID, is that we're getting a younger student population into online learning, more so than we've had before COVID, and at least in the institution where I work. And students are asking for more opportunities to engage with each other. And so we have that data that's more global than the data that came out of the class to show that students do see value in this, even if they dug in their heels from the start.
Yeah. And I think eventually, like you said too, with the current, you know, kind of climate that they're in, it's just that community space. It's teamwork, right? But it's also community and connecting with other people in a way that now you can't as much, right, as we could before.
And the aspect of community is so huge, and we could go on and on about, you know, how that's impacted people with regard to loneliness and but that's not our job today.
A couple other questions in the chat.
Yep, Julie asked about the Career Center being moved in. Yes, of course. So we do have an online Career Center. They actually start working with students at the point of application. So that they can work with their enrollment counselor and then later their student success counselor to sort of design their program. These soft skills elements are something that they really think about, because what we've done is we've worked with the other departments on campus and we've identified the soft skills that are important to their industry. So when the students are making their general education course selections, we've got a sort of a pathway for their programs for each department, each program anyways. But, you know, sometimes they might say, I'd really like to be, you know, a liaison in criminal justice, not just a police officer, but someone that works with the press, someone that works with, you know, the public, you know, and we might steer them towards general education courses that are going to give them more of those communication skills. So that's one thing we do. But then as they move through the Career Center, they might say, hey, I got this job description for such and such. It says I need these skills. I don't see any courses that offer these skills. You know, what the career counseling can say, you can maybe take this gen ed course for your history requirement, you know, and then you'll get some of those skills and you can put that on your resume. The other thing, as far as communicating with industry, Julie asked about that as well. So if you want to go to the CSU Global website, look for, I think the term that marketing uses is career-ready skills. Mm-hmm. There should be a whole website available that we share with our industry partners so they know what our general education programs do. You know, and then when we work with our industry partners, when we do outreach events, this is something that we highlight for our undergraduate students, so they know that this is part of our curriculum. This is something that students. It's all done now, so it's the work is over as far as setting it up. But it took a lot to convince everybody, and honestly, working with the marketing department was one of the essential things to kind of getting this widespread through campus. Because once they bought in, we didn't really have to do anything else because they were our advocates. They were the ones talking to everybody, the administration about why we need to do this. They loved it. I mean, they really did. It was something that could really sell what we were doing. The other thing too, and I'll just mention this, is that this badging is at least mapped for all of the programs. So beyond the general education aspect of it, what we've done is we've encouraged the department chairs and the faculty to map these soft skills for all of their programs to see if there are any gaps. So we used the same process we did for our general education courses, where we were just sort of looking what's available. And then we shared that with the people in the other departments, and they mapped their programs to see where their gaps were. And in many cases where there was a gap, we could modify the program design for each student to fill those gaps with a general education option. So it allowed for nice synergy.
The mapping was done, Julie, by the department leads. Up until July 1, I was department lead. And I did talk with my program chair at the time, and also with other faculty. So it wasn't, faculty were involved, but the program chair was responsible for making sure everything was mapped, and he gave us a charge. But it was, lots of hands make light work, and that's how we were able to do that.
Great. Well, we are actually at time. So I know it kind of flew by, didn't it? But I just want to thank you both for sharing the work that you're doing and, eliciting these questions, and Julie for the great questions.
Oh, fantastic questions, Julie.
Yeah, really helped us out to think through some of this, and also how others can use this model going forward. So I appreciate your time and your attention. I'll throw some links in the chat there for the recordings and so forth. We will post this on our website along with all of the other recordings for the day. So I hope that you all remain well and take good care. And thank you again. I hope to work with you in the future.
Thanks, Erin.
Thanks, Erin.
Erin, if you can download are you able to download the chat and send that?
Yes.